that signpost that say no parking on this side, along where your building is.
Yeah.
So always add a sign to it with a one-way and then a do not enter.
Technically, that building's not mine. There's two separate buildings.
Yeah.
I keep hearing in my building, but
We're just doing it, they're saying one, not they won't.
Yeah, then I put a do not enter on the back side.
That would be a nice facility.
Yeah, it should work out great. It's almost except the 6 months.
And the idea of having two other businesses perhaps in the future out front.
Yeah, there's, right now, Seats Beside my cousin, he's been talking to Dave more about working together. Dave really wants to bring him in and have a cider facility. He would, his customers would come visit him after all my that's a future discussion.
The 17-foot space, that was an issue. They have to move.
Yeah.
Oh, in the back.
Yeah, I can repaint them, however, I made the spaces bigger than they really needed to be, just because I have a really big truck and I like to have a lot of space. But I can tell you, right now, there's 15 spaces, so.
Which is more than you actually need.
Yeah.
So if you were to remove some spaces in order to...
Yeah, I have no trouble doing them already, because I only need 6, I only really need 5 spaces. And I'm still very 5 or 6.
Mr. Owens, if I could interject for a second.
Yes, sir.
It's his intention to repaint the parking spot to conform with all the requirements that Mr. John suggested. He needs to do that on the site plan before the next meeting.
Right, that's what we said.
I just want to make sure we're all on the
And
same page.
I was going to loop around back to
Yeah.
that once we
And
got to
also,
the end
while
of
everybody's
this.
looking at me, on page 86, you'll see a YouTube link. Don't do it at this moment in time, but it's applicable, and it will show you the process that the microcanner is currently undergoing to show you what would be going on in that building.
It's a 4-week time.
All right, so anything else, again, that you would like to see when the special land use and final site plan approval comes back to us at the September 5 meeting? Anything that you want him to have on that?
Like,
But light, he agreed to,
and type of plan fee.
he already has.
They're already there. Yeah.
1D, the 10-foot setback on the parking. That hasn't been addressed yet, has it?
Well, Mr. Johnson kind of addressed it, right here, but we already have that space there with the trees, so. I don't know what you want to do with spots over there in your,
Blocking it.
right.
I
So,
didn't have an opinion one way or the other. I just wanted, yes.
Make sure we.
I just wanted to make sure it had been addressed.
so,
How about you?
you got any problems? Okay. All right. Good. So, let's get that revised site plan in, and we'll get everything scheduled. Thanks. All right. One more to look at. It's letter B now in our old business, but it was originally D on there for the at 14141 White Creek parking lot. We talked about that last month, and we have on page 108 in your packet. All right. So, Mr. Johnson, if you want to walk us through your report dated August 2 on that one.
We have.
This is the second time you will have seen this project. We reviewed this back in June. Just to refresh your memory, this would be a proposed parking lot that would be proposed on property next to the White Creek Plaza off White Creek Avenue. That property is zoned highway commercial, and at the time, they were going to put 9 parking spaces on the adjacent property that would serve the employees in the White Creek Plaza building. So our ordinance did not allow off-site parking. What the applicant has shown us on the new site plan is they wish to purchase property to the east, I believe. It's north, I'm sorry.
We already own that.
They're going to add it to the White Creek Plaza site, so that the proposed parking lot would be on the same property as the building it's going to serve. So they have shown us that. They will need a land division approval. That would be a requirement of approval for them to obtain that before they receive a building permit. The proposed parking lot that they show you on the site plan you have in front of you contains 13 spaces. Back in June, they proposed only 9. Access would be from the existing White Creek Avenue driveway, and it is the same driveway that serves the Big B Coffee drive-through window.
This is up to 118.
In my report, which is dated August 2nd, I've listed items that they should be showing us on the site plan. In addition to the lot split approval, give us a narrative, the reason for the parking lot, who's going to use it. If there's any cross easement agreements, those should be recorded between parcels. And I've listed a number of items that should be shown on this version of the site plan that they need to show us. They do provide 3 deciduous trees between the parking lot and White Creek Avenue, which is acceptable given the short distance there. And then the area that is connected to the parcel to the north, where cars are parked now, we would recommend they put a no parking sign there, just so it isn't used for parking. They can use the 13 spaces that they intend to build. And then they appear to be 4 employees. I would recommend that they should sign those, the employee parking only. And then in my summary, they need to provide the information noted in item 4 of the report, as well as the other items listed at the bottom of page 1. The architect is here this evening if you have questions for him, and then you decide whether you want the site plan to be revised and brought back to you, or if it can be simply revised and subject then to staff review before a building permit is issued. Any questions for me?
You said that the way to get into that parking lot is through the Big B drive-through?
Well, it's part of it, I should say. It's you come in off White Creek Avenue, and you take that drive-through lane around to Big B. And they are proposing parking lots that would be adjacent to that driveway.
So they would be backing out into the driveway, the drive-through?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not liking that at all. Because, for one thing, we were worried when we said, okay, to Big B, that there would be no fire truck that gets through there. If there's cars in the driveway, now there's even a worse possibility that a fire truck can get through there.
There is sufficient room. If the cars are parked there, there's still enough room to meet our ordinance
What's
to
the
drive
width
through there.
between the,
24? So,
Plus 5 on the side of the building, this side of the
right. So really it's wide enough for two-way traffic, but it really is signed as one-way.
And
okay, so if you would explain to me the drive, right here, there's not room for 2 cars. How far over is that going to be from what this drive is already? You got a bigger site plan I can look at?
I have a bigger site plan.
Is the driveway currently 24 feet? Is that what you're saying? Plus 5 feet from the sidewalk and the building? Yeah. That's what it currently is.
No, we don't really know the sidewalk, so.
It's about 15 right now.
The current drive is 50. So it's going to be 24 plus the parking.
Usually less than 6 foot.
That 5 feet is the sidewalk right now.
Yeah, but we can't really count, I don't really wanna count that sidewalk, because you can't drive on it.
Correct.
Did I see that?
So what do you?
Mr. Johnson, you want to show
Can I
her
see it?
on the,
Lisa, currently it's 15, it's going to be 24.
For
For
adding
the
the
drive.
9 foot?
24 before you even start the park.
And then the parking starts on top of it.
Okay, alright, because that's not what I'm seeing in here, so I just wanted to make. Is that what these 2 dashed lines are, those extra, is that the extra?
Just look at it.
Okay, so, okay, I got this. I showed you this. Okay. So they're driving in here. No, they're not. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna look at that. Is this where those 1 parking spots were?
well, this is the road, like the cross access.
These cars are right
Okay, those cars are right there. So it is kind of running along that line. Okay, I could see that much better, sorry. It was not looking like it was gonna add any.
And Lisa, if I could address one more thing, we defined that area
What's
of the
defined
drive-through. Well, no, we defined that earlier as not actually the drive-through. The drive-through was on the other side of the building. This was merely an access road to the drive-through. So we know there's never going to be cars parked all the way back there from the drive-through. You're hearing the people back
Right.
now. So that's not really like a huge issue for me.
And if
Yeah, well,
I
I mean, now that it's wider too, it's not as big of an issue, but if it was like hardly room to even back up.
can, if I
Yes.
could, I think part of the reason the applicant wants to do this is because currently there are cars that park in that road,
Yeah,
as we all know, who are pizza delivery guys.
yeah.
And I think that Mr. Conley's trying to point out, for the Pinky Coffee, you'd have to have about 40 cars in line
Yeah,
before it got to that size.
exactly. And they're back, not that far back. But I just wanted to make sure because I know in the first application we had from Bigby, we wanted more room. And, you know, I'm glad we're gonna get more room because that's gonna
Yeah,
help.
it appears that they're adding 9 feet
And
prior.
then we are stipulating no parking in those other spots. That's what we're trying to stipulate, right?
I'm sorry.
We're trying to stipulate no parking in those other spots they used to park in.
I think what,
Where the cross access
yeah,
road
the
is.
cross
Yeah.
access road, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
I have a question for. Under number 8, the new plan has not been reviewed by the city engineer, and then a total of provision about requirements of the city engineer. Is that necessary in this case? Because it's,
I think the engineer took matter of fact, the engineer did take a look at it. He basically said it's not that big of a deal.
okay, that's what I was.
He indicated that there would be some very minor changes as far as the drainage is concerned, but that should be taken care of naturally.
Is that,
Sorry, again, while people are still looking at me, one other condition I would make this approval, if you wanted to approve it, is approval, they have to have the assessor do the land split in addition. I just want to make sure that's part of the approval. If there is.
I have one more question. There's no way they could pull in when they first come in the drive-thru and going the other way? He doesn't want to do it that
I
way.
don't know what you're,
Where you enter, instead of them pulling in the parking spot that way, couldn't they go around and have them park from the other way?
What would that mean?
I'm still not understanding.
But they would be backing into it. No. Oh, give me a second.
Go around the opposite side and pull in.
No, they're pulling in here. Couldn't they pull in there? and park
Oh,
there?
no, this is all grass, this is next door. This is where the paving is, so you come in,
So
you
they didn't
park
want to
there.
add all that paving. They didn't want to pave
Oh,
it.
and well, this is another site that's gonna
Right.
be developed. This is
So
actually
they just want to use
cross-access,
this
shared
area.
curb for
Okay.
these two properties.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you mean pulling in from the southwest corner of the building and going up around that way?
No, I meant the same way, but entering the parking spaces from the opposite side. So their cars will be parked toward the building instead of away from the building. But he said that I understand that, they have to pay more there for them to do that.
That's a different person's one.
Yeah, that's all they bought was that area.
It's actually the same one. We're just gonna. move
Just
the
that's all they
box.
are getting for that. We always think that things are easier than.
Right, so commissioners, the option before us tonight is we can look at approving this site plan tonight with adding these conditions that Mr. Johnson has pointed out, and things that are important to us, or we can ask them to revise that so that you're looking at a more inclusive site plan. So what's your pleasure on that?
So it's conditional on the split,
Yeah, the assessor has to take a look at that.
the signage for, parking in the areas, things like that.
On all of these things on item 4.
Are you making that motion?
Can I help you with that?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
I think she's just
I'm trying, but I'm not getting there.
vocalizing what we can look at.
Yeah.
So those are the things, is if you want to approve it contingent on, make those
Yes.
changes, then you could certainly make the motion that way.
Mr. Owens, would you like to take a recommendation from the city?
Yes, please.
Let's see how you would say it.
I would say you would be approving the site plan,
August 2.
7/31/17,
Yeah,
subject to the site plan being revised to comply with the planner's report dated August 2nd, and including a sign in the cross-access area being posted as no parking. And just for the record, that my report also makes sure that the lot division would be approved.
By the city assessor.
By the city assessor, that's part of the recommendation.
Is that what this?
Right, just,
What about signage for employees only?
yep,
Yes, that would be
that's in there.
the employees only, yes.
All right, so do you want to say a motion that you just said? or-
Yes.
Second, that.
I got just one quick question. The lighting in the back of there is sufficient, correct, for parking and stuff?
There's lighting on the back of the building currently, that it is lit up.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so, just so we,
One other thing that is would be, the revised site plan would be submitted to the zoning administrator for final review and approval, and no building permit would be issued until it's signed by the secretary of the planning commission for the zoning.
okay, so that's the motion and support that we have.
okay.
It's the approval of the site plan with those, contingencies.
I want to clarify,
Yep.
the motion that was made did not include Mr. Johnson's last two recommendations.
So we need to make another motion.
Zoning
So I'll amend my second if you amend your first.
Yes.
to include the last two.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Everybody clear what we're voting on?
Lord.
Yes.
I believe so.
Okay. So basically, the items that would be from here down. Well, all of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying from this whole letter.
Okay, so unless you see something on there that,
Well, he didn't state all of them in his
Right.
recommendation, that's why I said that.
Well, we added in that, what Mr. Womack suggested about the partial split. Make sure that,
That was included.
yeah,
Was it-
that's the city assessor and all that.
If I made, the motion that was made, said that the site plan would be approved with the changes suggested from the planner.
Yes,
So that would cover what you're talking about in the letter.
the whole letter, okay. All right. Any questions on that? You ready to vote?
I didn't see the employees only.
It's on,
I read it. I I just can't find it right now, but it is in there.
She read it. Let's see.
Yes, I see it, number 9. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Right? Any other questions? All right, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no? That's good.
Thank you.
All right. So now we're gonna look at sign stuff. So, what was originally 10B under your old business is now 10C, the sign standards ordinance amendment. I believe that starts on page 103 or 102. That numbering got kind of messed up.
This bankruptcy property, 14.
Not yet, that's his memo. So the section 40-545 specific sign standards ordinance amendment, that would be on page 105 in your packet. But, yeah, but if I, especially on page 107, the part that's highlighted in yellow, that's the part that we need to especially note.
So it's the part that's in yellow on page 107 where the recommendations from the city planner to do additional guidance regarding increasing the size of the sign beyond 100 square feet. It's the only other change I've made to the document. Unfortunately, this one and 40-49 were not able to pass at the council level at this point because there's not been a public hearing. Well, I guess theoretically you could make a recommendation for council at this point. I'd recommend waiting until September.
Okay. All right. So I'll make a motion that we table this till September so the council's had a chance.
Second.
Okay. All right. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All right.
Keep that discussion. And I think Mr. Gray had discussion.
Well, I was just going to ask if there are any questions on it before we actually went to just pushing it off till next month. But
Well,
We
we
could
just
probably
kind of
handle
pushed it
it.
without any discussion at all. So it's like,
right. Well, we got another crack at it next month. All right. So now, so is that, it means the other ordinance we need to, that ties in with that too, right?
Yep.
So what is now D in our new reworded agenda? We would want to consider tabling that one as well. So the city council has. Yeah. Right? So,
I'm good with table.
all right, is that a motion?
Sure.
All right, good. All right. Any discussion on it? Why do you have your hand up there?
Because I'm confused. Are we doing this
We
right here?
haven't got there yet.
Okay, thank you.
All right, got a motion to table that. Support for it, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. All right, now you can go to your Reed versus Gilbert memo, which is all the way back up at the top of your packet. We move down there for discussion. So that starts at page 14. Right? No. Where's your memo going? Packet I had in my email to me is a little bit different, but
the
I have it
24.
in front of me.
24. Page 24. Mr. Johnson.
Everybody have the right page.
Yes. Page 24.
Is everybody sufficiently alert to go through this?
Oh, yeah.
It's only going to take a couple hours.
Okay, that's good.
All right, we'll go, you tell me whether I'm going too fast or too slow, and stop me at any point in time. But basically, we are revising or proposing to revise your city sign ordinance based on the Supreme Court ruling in 2015 from a case in Arizona that the ruling clarified that the purpose of a sign is also the content. And in accordance with the First Amendment free speech rights, the government cannot tell anybody what to put on the sign or prohibit what's to put on the sign. Your ordinance, as well as just about every other ordinance in the United States, regulates sign by their content. Some examples would be real estate signs, you know what's on that sign. Construction sign that you define, you know what's on there. Construction advertising. Special event signs, political signs, they all regulate the content. And in addition to saying that a real estate sign must advertise real estate, you also dictate how big it can be and then how long it can stay up. So what we're trying to do is bring your ordinance into conformance with the Supreme Court ruling, because basically it's unconstitutional. You could take the position that we have a good sign ordinance, let's keep it that way. From my perspective, and probably your attorney, it's always better to be in line with the Constitution than outside the Constitution, because if somebody sued you for enforcing your unconstitutional sign ordinance, they would go to court and they would win. And then your ordinance would be thrown out. So better be ahead of the ball game, and that's why we're doing this. That was on the work program. It was identified as part of the number one priority, so that's why we're jumping into it now. And rather than give you the whole sign ordinance at once, we're going to bite it off in manageable pieces so you can understand what we're getting into, and also you have a lot on your agenda all the time, and we don't want to overwhelm you with that. So what I'd like to do is just kind of go through my memo, tell you what the summary is, and then go through as much as the ordinance, kind of paraphrasing and keeping you alert at the same time. Something's a lot of fun for me. I get to write this stuff up. So, all right, first page of the memo, things we looked at. Signs may be regulated differently as temporary compared to permanent. You can regulate signs by physical description. In other words, you can call them ground signs, pole signs, sidewalk signs, banners and pennants. They don't tell you what's on the sign if you refer to them by their physical description. Digital signs, same thing. Off-premise and on-premise signs, those are content-based, just by their definition. If it's an on-premise sign, you must advertise what's on the premises. If it's an off-premise sign, which is what your definition of billboard is, that's also unconstitutional because your ordinance says a billboard must advertise something that's not on the premises. So you're telling them what to put on the sign. Okay, so those terms would come out of your ordinance. We would have to redefine what a billboard is. It's no longer an off-premise sign. We may need a new definition for billboards, or you may wish to consider outlawing billboards altogether, off-premise signs altogether. Yes?
Based on what you said earlier, though, we could say a billboard is a sign of this size.
Yes.
That we have free. We just can't say a billboard can say this.
Yeah, and some communities regulate billboards by the distance from the expressway, so that's one way to define it. Your ordinance doesn't. It just says it's an off-premise sign that's allowed only in the highway commercial zoning district. I don't know, maybe you do, but are there any billboards out there right now?
On the highway?
In the highway commercial district?
Billboard not coming down
But I know there are.
North of the Drive.
Yeah, there's.
Really know if that's within our jurisdiction.
Yeah, I'm talking about what you would normally consider a
But I
typical
don't think
billboard.
so. Do you think? Oh, wait, yes. No.
Right, yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
We can easily check that out, and if we find out that you don't even have any billboards now, then we would double check with your attorney, but you may just say, well, we're not going to allow those. We're not going to, we'll define it, but we're not going to allow it.
Well, there used to be, the previous Chamber of Commerce had some billboards, and that was what they used for part of their revenue, and they had to come down when certain new laws came in effect with, I can't remember what the grammar was, but it was something along the expressway, and then something along with the Spartan store. Because I got the old emails from where they had to be removed.
How long ago was that?
That would have been 06, 05, somewhere in there.
I think there's one right before the, Open Estates mobile home park. Off of Duncan Drive, that's the Cedar. That's Cedar. No, before 15. Before 15, across from the middle school.
Oh, okay, that'd be outside of.
It's not, it's Cedar. I think.
Yeah, but it's not highway.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, I think it's a billboard right there.
So we'll check that out to see what's,
That
where
might
they are.
be like grandfathered in from before that.
Yeah, if they're existing now, they would be grandfathered.
Right.
Assuming they were legal when they were put up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a thing about billboards, we do have to address that. So, the other thing I would point out, at the first page of my memo, the signs within any one zoning district must be treated uniformly. There are some exceptions that you may allow a different sign type for the length of a road or the type of a road, or if it's an historic district, you may allow different sign sizes or types, even if they're in the same zoning district. And then certain signs may be exempted. Supreme Court ruling, not everybody agrees with that, but for instance, traffic safety signs that would be put up to direct somebody through a parking lot or into a parking lot, or the government may put up a sign about, certainly a stop sign is a good example of that. Those would be things that we've addressed that and written those into your ordinance. On the second page, let me just kind of go through the summary of what we're tackling here. Number one, we want to make this signs content neutral as much as we can. So what we're doing is removing many definitions from your ordinance. By the time we get done, your design ordinance will be smaller than it is today, which can be a good thing. So definitions like real estate signs, construction signs, non-commercial signs, which are also political signs or election signs, entranceway signs, those are all will be taken out of your ordinance, and we'll see that as we go through. In order for those signs to be displayed without naming them, then they would simply probably be called temporary signs. And my suggestion is allow a certain square footage of sign and a number per parcel by zoning district. You may think, well, that opens the door to a lot of different signs being put up, but if you regulate simply the number and the size, then anybody can put up a sign that would be a real estate sign for sale, a garage sale sign, Lordy, Lordy, Craig's turning 40, those kind of signs that people put up on a temporary basis that may or may not need a permit depending on the size. So that's how we would regulate all the signs we're getting rid of by name, construction signs, real estate signs, special event signs. Every parcel would be allowed some signs by zoning district. And you just say, you can have this size of a sign. For instance, one community said they would allow in the residential zone, any parcel could have a sign up to, I think, 12 square feet. And they could have as many as they wanted as long as the total didn't exceed 12 square feet. So that way you could have a number of election type signs on your property at the same time, and you wouldn't be in violation of the sign ordinance. So there are ways to do that. I think in some cases they may be considered a very simple way to do it. Some people say, well, you're opening the door to too many signs. You get to decide how many signs are allowed on a parcel and the size. You can still regulate that. For temporary signs, your current rule limits the display period to 60 days within any 120-day period. Well, that could be an issue if somebody is trying to lease their property or sell their property. I would be surprised if that section of your ordinance is enforced. You've got time to go out and produce some real estate signs. We would want to take that limitation out of there. And besides that, the ordinance requires that the business or property owner keep a log of the number of days the sign has been displayed, and then give that to the zoning administrator when they ask for it. I can't think of a better way to start it. Give me that log that you've been keeping on this sign in your front yard. They just don't do that. It's not an enforceable rule. So we want to get rid of that. We would add a number of definitions: banner signs, flag signs, government signs, and revise the definitions for directional signs and ground signs. Again, we're going to take out the names of signs, construction and employment signs, for example. Number 4, You exempt a number of signs from regulation. For instance, help wanted signs are exempt from your ordinance. They can be up to 6 square feet. Directory signs, which is defined, can be 10 square feet. Warning signs can be 2 square feet, and memorial signs may be 4 square feet. Because we can no longer refer to those signs by type, what I would suggest is let's just decide signs of a certain size, whether it's 2 square feet, 4, or 6, are simply exempt from the zoning ordinance. So somebody could put up a help wanted sign if it was under that threshold. Let's say you pick 4 square feet. Any sign under 4 square feet is exempt from the ordinance. So I could put up a real estate sign. I could put up a help wanted sign. I could put up a political sign. You're not going to regulate that because you already don't regulate a number of those kinds of signs, but you regulate them by content. So we're getting away from the content and just saying you can have a sign, and we, the government, if it's smaller than 4 square feet, we're not going to tell you what you can put on it. It's just exempt. So you see where I'm coming from with this content business? Okay. So we have to go through that and decide what the size of that sign would be. And we're going to add regulations, different regulations for digital and electronic board signs that I do come to. You have some, but it can be beefed up. So, yes.
If those signs are exempted, then you said you can't put a certain number of days that they can be.
If they're exempted, they're exempted. There is no limit.
I don't think that is a problem.
Well, yeah, and I don't think it's as big a problem as you might think it is. You've all been driven around the city and seen garage sale signs from last August, okay, that are still up. Well, if they're torn, bent, faded, or if they're put on a utility pole, there are regulations, or there will be, that those kind of signs the city can require to be taken down. If they're illegible or torn or if they're in the right of way, you have to get rid of them. So, and if they're unsafe, if they block vision, those regulations, most of those are in there now. We're going to look at them and make sure that there are regulations so that you just don't end up with a whole bunch of signs that you don't want. Again, we're only doing this because the Supreme Court said so. Okay? But we're trying to make it simple. We're trying to fit in with what you already do allow, and yet still give people the right to display their message without the city telling them what has to be on that message for a particular period of time and according to a certain size. So as we go through this, you get to decide. We'll point out the pitfalls. Between the 7 and 9 of us, we'll try to come up with the best wording we can. We're not in a rush to do this. The Supreme Court decided this 2 years ago. We haven't been sued since then. We probably won't be, but we need to be prepared for it. So we're not in a rush. We just want to make sure it's thorough. So any questions on the memo? If you want to go to whatever page your computer screen tells you, we'll get into the proposed amendments to the sign ordinance dated August 1st.
14, page 14.
And this won't be the last time you see it, so I'm not going to read this, but I would point out things that we're changing, give you a flavor, and you can look at this on your own time, and then maybe, if need be, point out some new definitions and why they're in there. So, first thing we're tackling are the sign definitions. Anything that's crossed out is coming out of the ordinance. We've added a definition for a banner sign because you didn't define one of those. Billboards, that's coming out, and again, I've explained we need to decide whether those would continue to be allowed or not. Changeable message sign, that's going to be replaced by a definition for digital or electronic reader board sign. It's really the same thing, but we don't need to define it twice. Commercial establishment should be added because that is a good definition of a separate business, for instance, within a strip mall or an office building. Next page, you'll see we're taking out a number of definitions for construction sign, digital, directional. We did change the definition of directional sign. We've added definitions for digital sign. Directional sign, we're changing that where it talks about to give information for drivers. And there's language in there about this is a content-based distinction, but these signs are important to prevent public confusion and facilitate collision-free flow of traffic. If you ever got challenged on that, you could say, well, Your Honor, this is for public safety. We have to have this in our ordinance. Even though it's content-based, it's for a good reason. So that's what it is in there. We define festoon, which you do allow, or if you want to outlaw them, at least we know what they are. A flag sign, permanent, and flag sign temporary. A temporary flag sign would be one of those feather flags or flutter flag signs you've seen on a pole, and they flutter in the wind. Everybody's got them nowadays, so we define those. Those would be a type of temporary sign. We define freestanding sign, government sign, and then we redefine ground sign. Identification sign is new, incidental sign, and you can see on that page what's new and what isn't. Again, if you haven't had time to read this, you'll have time next time we go over this. Won't be the last time. Things like nameplate, incidental sign, those are content-based, so they have to come out of there. Same thing on the next page, non-commercial message or non-commercial sign. Again, you're telling them what has to be on the sign. We've defined pennant sign, permanent sign, pole sign. You currently define pylon or pole sign. We just use the term pole sign. And then real estate sign at the bottom of that page. All those terms have to come out. Yes?
I have a couple questions about some of these definitions here. The one for obsolete sign, is that, I'm trying to figure out how that's allowable as a definition, because it seems like where it says here that it advertises a product is no longer made or advertises a business that is closed, is that not content derived?
Yeah, I looked at that, and it's a gray one. I think it's not. Some ordinances call that abandoned signs, and then let me look at that again and maybe use that term instead of obsolete sign. But it's a sign that hasn't been used. I can go back and look at that and see. It is kind of a gray area. I left it in there.
And a similar question about snipe sign, which I've never heard of before today. So
No?
I'm assuming it was for a snipe hunt or something like that. But again, it's saying having no application to the premises where located, and how does one determine an application without considering content?
Yeah. Well, you're right. We could take that out. It's prohibited in any rate. So to take it out would be okay, I think, because later on it's prohibited, and so that's why I chose to leave it in. I think to define it.
Yeah, and I understand that this is the definition. This is not telling us what we're doing with the definition.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure I had a complete understanding of what was meant by content derived versus other ways of determining what a sign was.
Yeah, you're right. That's one of those gray areas because it says to the premises, so you could make an argument that it's content-based. I'll see if I can find a different definition because we are going to, and currently prohibit them. They're not allowed in the city. But again, if you're going to either allow something or not allow something, it's always good to know what the definition is. So I'll see if there's a different definition of that in some other ordinance that I can use. Okay, we've added the term temporary sign, and then traffic warning sign. Again, that's a safety-based type definition. So pretty self-explanatory, but you get the sense of where we're going with this. And again, if a new definition, if you don't understand it, let's bring it up and talk about it, because if one person doesn't understand it, there may be two of you that don't understand it, and then pretty soon the whole city doesn't understand it. So we want to make sure at least you understand it. The next section is prohibited signs. Quite a few are prohibited in the city. You'll notice snipe sign is on that list. And then the new language at the top is just kind of a rephrase there, but any sign not expressly permitted is automatically prohibited. And the listing here, these are definitely, no questions asked, these are definitely prohibited. And you can see which ones they are. So all those have been left in. I took out snipe sign. I just said signs placed in any public right-of-way. And then billboards, they took that out. Pole signs, unless it's specifically permitted elsewhere. So You can see which ones we don't want in the city, and again, we're trying to keep as much of the current ordinance as we can.
Under sign signs, this is signs placed on a waste receptacle. I mean, I know it's prohibited, but everyone has their advertising,
Yeah.
so that the guys know which garbage to pick up.
Yeah,
I thought that was kind of,
yeah, you're right, that's a bit of a stretch. That might be one of those signs that falls below the size threshold that we don't regulate, because we don't want to get into the business of regulating that stuff, you know. Let me just take that off. That's, you're right, good pickup there. Anything else on that page that strikes you as illogical or?
Yeah, just for more clarification, there's up above in the top part, you have animated signs, you have flashing signs, you have video signs, you got all these things that are put down in the prohibited. I see animated and I see flashing, but I don't see video signs, so kind of a gray area there. What can be and what can't be as far as
Right,
flashing
that's,
video. I mean, there's a lot of different
yeah.
descriptions you have in the top part that's not down in the prohibited, so.
Right, that's a good pickup there. Yeah, let me see, that may be a conflict with the digital sign, and that may be considered animated. Same thing with signs having moving members. We would have to put some kind of a exclusion for digital signs. So, yeah, thanks. Thanks for pointing that out. We'll make sure that doesn't conflict. Anything else on that page?
what is the vehicle, business sign?
A vehicle business sign, that's in your current ordinance. That's just a sign on a parked or displayed truck. And it's used for advertising purposes rather than for transportation. So if someone,
So just parked in their lot all the time?
well, that's kind of a judgment call. If you have a business and you happen to park it out by the road on the weekend, that's different than if you rent a semi-trailer and put vacuum cleaners for sale and stick it out by the road and then claim, oh, that's my business. It's not it's a vehicle. It's just parked there once in a while. So that's a judgment call whether they're doing it to get around the sign ordinance or if it's just part of their vehicle fleet.
So if you take a McDonald's truck and park it in front of the burger.
I mean, because some cars, like, you can have advertising that you put on the car.
Sure. Yeah, we're not trying to regulate that. I don't think your current ordinance does. It's just, it's one of those things you kind of know when you see it because it's been there for 6 months.
Okay.
And you know they don't run that business. Because they let somebody park their truck there and they're maybe charging them money to park in front of their business. So that's kind of a judgment call, but it does prohibit that, so. Exemptions to permitting, in other words, the following signs shall not require a permit, provided they're outside the right-of-way, adequate sight distance, and meet the requirements of the ordinance. So, you currently allow address signs on single-family houses and in other zoning districts. We kind of reworded that to say, you know, this is going to be permitted in case of an emergency. We kept the size, and we just kind of changed the language a little bit for other zoning districts, because it just makes sense to require addressing of buildings. So that's for emergency purposes, so we've added language to provide a reason for that. And then I think the million-dollar question, which we can discuss tonight, we don't have to decide tonight, but again, I brought up what signs would be exempt in terms of size. 2, 4, 6. Again, you have a number of regulations as you go through scroll through the rest of the sign ordinance. On the next couple pages, you see which ones are all being taken out because of their content regulation. But the sizes are all different. And so, you know, which size pops up the most that you would say anything under 3 square feet, 1.5 feet. You know, I work in communities that are as low as 1.5 feet or 2 square feet. They don't regulate. And those are signs on the gas station. There are no trespassing signs. There are signs hanging above somebody's door that gives their business name, nameplate type signs. Those are exempt now. So it's just a matter of what do you feel comfortable with opening the door to say any sign under, 2 square feet, we don't care about. We're not going to regulate it. So maybe you want to drive around the city, keep this in mind, and see what's out there before we come back and talk about that. They vary. Most of them are, 4 to 6 square feet. Yeah. Your average, stick in the yard, election type sign is usually a 1.5 feet square, something like that.
Is that where you mentioned the 12 foot? As long as they have like 4 3-foot signs up there. Was that in a different spot?
That's different. These would be
That's different.
exempt.
Okay.
The one I'm talking about would be, these are permitted signs that you can have that are bigger than 2 square feet,
Yeah,
but you can only have up to so many square feet per parcel. And it's going to be different for commercial versus residential, obviously. But those would be temporary signs.
Okay, gotcha.
Square feet, that would cover most every real estate sign and so forth.
Yeah.
Would that cover special event signs too, if they were doing that size?
That would be a temporary.
Yeah, that's a little bit different. You could obviously have a special event sign, but it would be, most of them are bigger than 2 square feet. Those would be a temporary sign that if they're put up in a commercial district, then we would have regulations for temporary signs in commercial zones that might be, you decide, maybe they're 32 square feet, because that's about how big a community event sign might be.
Well, I've seen some of them that are the same size as a real estate sign.
Oh, yeah,
Just
sure.
depends on what
American
the
Legion
event-
Fish Fry, that you stick in somebody's front
Yeah.
yard. Yeah, you can put those up if they're exempt, they're under 2 square feet. Put them up as many as you want. You pick the number.
So you mentioned before that other communities have went down as far as, in your experience, as far as a 1.5 square foot, 1.5 square feet for their exemption line. That names one extreme. I don't know how much precedent there is out there since there's only just a couple of years since this decision, but where are you seeing communities that have addressed this? What is the average sign exemption cutoff that you've noticed?
Yeah, we've written about 3 or 4 of these for different communities. I think the biggest one was 3 square feet. I think that was City of Ionia, was 3 square feet. Which isn't very big.
No.
One community said, in a commercial zone, it was, I think they chose 2 square feet, but you could only have 10 of them. So they did tack on a little bit of a regulation, but only because they just didn't, one of the commissioners had a nightmare vision of Burma-shaped signs in front of a gas station, and all of them are exempt because they're under the size, but he said, okay, they got to be 10 feet apart and no more than 10 per parcel, so we wrote that in. So try to imagine the worst thing that could happen and see if we can live with it, so that's about it. I mean, you can kind of go through those exemptions, or the ones that were taken out, which is most of that chapter. And then just, we'll come back at the next meeting. I'll give you another version of this, and we'll talk about that size that we want exempt. Let's see, the last page, or second to last page, is temporary signs. Again, this is something that will be a little different than what you have now. Your temporary signs are limited to 60 days within a 120-day period. Again, that's not practical for real estate signs or for sale signs. So we're keeping the language that you see there under temporary signs. That would be, they would regulate the location, if they're a hazard, and a visual hazard. You can't do that. Okay, so you're not really exempted from that. But we would add regulations for temporary signs that if it's can't be displayed at the bottom of page 9, if it's, at least my page 9. If it's torn, bent, faded, unreadable, unsightly, you can't keep it up any longer. You know, take it down, put up a new temporary sign. The last page that I want you to go to starts with number 4, where it says temporary signs held by a person. You do allow those. And that's Little Caesars. You can't be in the road right away. You can't hamper the visibility of a driver on or off the site. Okay, that's just a safety thing.
Does that go for panhandle?
I don't think so. Well, that's a good point. Could, depending on if that's a temporary sign or an exempt sign. The person can be in the road right away. They just can't have their sign with them. So, yeah, I might defer that to your city attorney on that one.
Seems like I saw a case where they couldn't disallow it.
It gets complicated very quickly.
Yeah,
Okay.
free speech stuff, type stuff.
That's what I was thinking.
And then a new language we would add would be temporary signs shall only be internally illuminated. And then 6 and 7 are really the kind of language that we've used in other communities, where right now, again, you have a 60-day limitation on temporary sign. We would be taking that out, and we would put this language in there that says a temporary sign may be installed concurrent with the event or occurrence and removed upon the end of the event. The zoning administrator shall have the discretion to determine the beginning and the end of the event, and whether it becomes a permanent sign. So we've used that in other communities. We've had attorneys look at it. They didn't come up with anything better. And it really is kind of self-regulating. So if the American Legion or the high school wants to put up a banner sign across somewhere, they're probably going to take it down when it's done. A real estate sign, it's going to come down when the lot is sold, because the realtor needs that sign somewhere else. You always have the risk of a business having a sale, permanent sale, and they've got that temporary sign out there. It's been up there for 6 months. Well, the zoning administrator can go by and say, you know, I'm kind of keeping track. It's been up there a long time. That's in my mind, that's become a permanent sign. You already have a permanent sign. You can't have 2 permanent signs, so you have to take it down. And so it can be regulated that way, but most of these are self-regulating. And it gets away from the homeowner or business owner keeping track, or the city keeping track, taking out a permit for a temporary sign for 30 days, and then you have to go out and make sure it's down. You can do that, but again, real estate is probably the biggest issue here, because they're allowed in every zoning district. You can't call a real estate sign. You can't differentiate that from a for sale sign for Art Van or anybody else that has a sale. So think about that. We would run this by your attorney, of course, but I had other attorneys look at it, and they thought it was okay. So that is new language. It's a little more flexible than what you're used to, but it also is a little more permissive, I guess.
You said the window sign is changed.
Window sign, yes. I think those are, we didn't get to the regulation of window sign. I don't think those are regulated. They're defined. Typically, most communities regulate them very lightly.
The current regulation on window signs is that they have to allow people outside the building to see inside the building.
Yeah, right. Right. And you still can't have flashing lights and that sort of stuff, sorry. But you don't regulate the sign other than what Mike just said, so.
Yeah, square footage.
Right, yeah. Depending on the window that's in, there's a certain percentage that it can cover, I think.
Yeah.
Think if it's something inside the building, you can't regulate it, right?
You can, if it's in the window.
And that was my question.
I know that was one of the big things with Liquor Hut when that was here. The windows, they were plastered with.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of the window that can be covered, and it has to be a certain amount that's transparent.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the end of that. Thank you for your attention. Good questions. Again, look through that, and I think the next time we come back, we'll tackle a different section and give you our suggestions on what needs to be changed. And eventually, we will have to hold a public hearing on this, and the city council then would make the final decision.
All right, good. So you're looking at the signs, so we can add that to our discussion. All right. In your packet is some correspondence. There's